So, hey, welcome to an extremely special edition of Hey, My Friend Made a Thing. Because today I'm talking to someone really cool. I'm talking to
Me.
You're supposed to say who you are.
Oh, okay. My name is Jess Johnson.
Mhm.
I'm your sister.
Oh yes, this is my sister, who is pretty much one of the coolest people I know, and I know a lot of cool
Thank you.
people. But yes,
Thank you.
possibly one of the coolest people on the planet at the moment.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a lot of us, so I appreciate that.
Very cool.
Okay. Am I supposed to tell you what I do now?
Yes, tell us what's this cool shit that you do.
Well, I am a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley,
Mhm.
and I am a demonologist. So I study ancient Egyptian religion, specifically demons.
That's fucking rad. And yeah, no, that's really all there is to say. That's fucking rad.
Thank you.
And like, I tell people this, I was like, yeah, my sister's an Egyptologist, and they're like, that's cool, and I'm like, she specializes in demonology, and they're like, wait, what? And I was like, yeah.
It's niche, yeah. It's in there.
But it's like unambiguously cool.
Thank you. I think so. There's
Yeah.
not many of us that do it. There's about 7 in the world,
7.
including me,
Really?
give or take. Yeah.
How? Just how did this happen? How does a bright, intelligent young woman with such a bright future get drawn into the sordid world of demons
The occult. No.
and the occult? Yes. How did this happen?
Well, I started taking classes in college.
Mhm.
My advisor at UC Berkeley was actually the first person to teach me Egyptology courses
Oh my
when I went to
gosh.
my undergrad. You
Oh, it's still recording.
okay?
Don't worry about it. It just does that.
Okay.
Okay, we're good.
She's also a demonologist,
Mhm.
so I think that stuck in my head.
Yeah.
And then it's just kind of formed from there. So
It's so cool.
thank you.
Like, was there a moment that you're like, this is cool, or was it just slowly, you're just like, yeah, digging it?
I think it was when I was doing my thesis for my
Yeah.
master's. Yeah, I had to think of a topic and I couldn't really think of anything, and I just, almost like a bolt of lightning, just woke up one day and was like, yeah, demons are really cool, and they're really weird, and they're not what anyone thinks that they are, so let's explore.
Telling the truth about demons. They're
Telling
not
the
what you think.
No, they're not. I think everybody thinks of like Christian demons, right? Where they
Yes, universally inimical. They will try to fuck you up. Specifically, like corruption. Specifically, they want
Yes.
to take good people and make them do bad things. They make deals with you. They want to make you betray not only your best interest, but betray godliness.
Yes, yeah, and it's strictly malevolent.
Right.
They only
Always
ever
inimical.
have-
Yes, only malevolent. Never just a guy.
Never just a guy.
Never
Never
just a
just
guy.
a being like chilling.
Yeah,
hanging out.
never just chilling. So,
Yeah, and like ancient Egyptian demons aren't like that.
and not at all.
No, I mean they can be.
Yeah,
So
they can be dicks.
Yes, they
Okay.
can be not very kind. But
Oh,
I
I
mean,
see.
you can go from complete annihilation to causing a headache to being totally fine and not harming anybody. So they can
Okay.
be malevolent or benevolent.
Now, are they ever specifically benevolent? Like, do they ever just like do a guy a solid?
I don't know if they do you a solid. If you know the
Hmm.
right things and you're doing what you're supposed to do,
Mhm.
you have nothing to worry about.
Ah.
So they're not just gonna go and,
Okay.
and be mean for the sake of being
Okay,
mean.
so they're bureaucrats, kind of.
They have a function.
Like they're there to stamp your paperwork, but your paperwork's not in order. They will make you sorry.
They will harm and or annihilate your being if you don't have the right paperwork.
Oh. That's not great.
But
That's
you're fine otherwise.
you're fine otherwise.
Yes.
One of the things that strikes me about ancient Egyptian culture, especially around death, is how bureaucratic it can be.
Mm.
Like how much you really do want to have your papers in order.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think a lot of people think ancient Egyptians are obsessed with death, but it's
Yeah.
actually the reverse. They're obsessed with continuing their life, and part of that is overcoming death, right? That's why
Uh-huh.
there's so much that has to do with dying and transition and burial,
Mhm.
because it's not actually about dying, it's about
No.
overcoming that and achieving everlasting life.
Well, I mean, you could argue that for mortal beings it is the same. That obsession with immortality is necessarily an obsession with destroying mortality, because mortality is kind of like the thing that's in the way of everlasting life.
Right. Yeah. And there's kind of two different paths that a lot of societies take. It's either everything is awful, there's nothing after death, like we need to live our life on Earth like it's a giant party.
Right, or the whole medieval idea of like everything's awful, the only thing we have to look forward to
Is after death.
is afterwards.
Yes.
Let's just put everything on that.
Yeah, and both exist. Both ideologies exist in Egypt, but obviously the dominant one that we know of most of the time is trying to overcome death to achieve everlasting life.
Oh, wow. Now, did they see this as life of a different kind or life of a different sort? Or is it just like more of the same? Like, is it like if you do this, if you overcome death and do life, are you still just like eating and walking around and like like having to poop and all that stuff? Or no, I mean, or are you some kind of elevated being? Like, is it like like, is there a nirvana state? Are you trying to get to some kind of like no longer bodily state, or do you just really want to be just a guy forever?
It's a multi-part answer.
I see. Okay.
There's more than one part to the soul.
Yeah.
In ancient Egyptian religion, just like there's more than one part of the body. Also in ancient Egyptian religion.
Let me see if I remember. You gotta make sure your ba, your ka, and your ak are all like figured out.
Yes.
And you want to keep them together, right?
Theoretically.
Theoretically.
Yes. But they all have separate functions. And sometimes it's unclear for us studying what exactly something does and how they come together and come apart. But the ka is the thing that is like your life force. And when people who are still alive give you offerings on your grave, your ka is the thing that goes and eats the food so that you can be sustained in the afterlife.
Oh, it's kind of like a friendus.
Yeah, so in that sense, like, you are eating. You do need to eat and be sustained in the afterlife, and that's what your ka is for.
Okay.
Your ba needs to stay with your corpse and can also travel around the underworld and do things, and is almost like
you just go on errands, go to the store.
Yeah, and goes through the journey through the underworld. Is the one that uses Book of the Dead spells, the one that encounters the demons, that needs to have all the right paperwork.
Yeah, signed in triplicate, just properly stamped.
Really busy guy.
Oh, so that's it's really dangerous for your ba if you don't have your papers in order, because then it could just like go pop down to the bodega on the corner and get stuck there and can't get back to your body, and then you're just like, where's my ba?
Where is it? We don't
Dude,
know.
where is
my ba?
Where is my ba?
Yes. Yeah.
That would be bad.
That would, yes, be bad, because you need your ba to travel through the entire underworld to achieve Ak. And Ak is almost like the most enlightened version. It's also the part of your soul that hangs out with the god Ra, who makes these cycles from daylight to nighttime, where he travels across the sky through the underworld and rises and sets. That's how they thought of the sun, as Ra in a bark. So when you achieve everlasting life and you become an Ak, that part of you hangs out in the boat with him.
You just get to hang out and sail around with Ra all day.
Yeah.
That sounds super chill.
Yeah, but there's other parts of the underworld. There's like, almost the Elysian Fields equivalent.
Right, okay, yeah.
And in that sense, you're tilling land, hanging out.
So it's like the Elysian Fields in that it's like paradisical and really nice. But is it like that in that only certain guys get to go there? Like only a certain class of people get to go hang out, or
not a certain class. I think it's people who have done the right thing, have the right information,
who have their papers in order.
Who have their papers in order, yeah. Who have successfully completed the journey. So, in that sense, you are doing things that you did while you were alive. So it is about continuing the same journey, basically, and the same functions, and that includes your family that's still alive, remembering your name and keeping your memory alive. Like that's huge. You have to be able to have those connections.
It's so fascinating to me when I find that totally different cultures from totally different parts of the world have the same idea. That's a really specific idea. Like when you think about ofrendas and you think about this idea of like being remembered and having your name be spoken.
Right.
And I remember when I learned what they did to Akhenaten.
Yep.
Like, to have your name rubbed out of the record.
Huge.
Super big deal. Like, this is
Huge.
in complete annihilation, and it fucks you forever.
Yes.
Like, because your ka, you can't eat. It's just being starved forever, and that's why that was such a big deal. So, like, this guy offended the priest class so thoroughly that they were like, we're not just gonna, like, ruin your life. We're gonna ruin your own life forever by making it so no one even remembers your name.
Yeah, and I think, like, it kind of goes back to this stereotype that ancient Egyptians are obsessed with death. Because part of it is those who are left behind and still living, right, visit the tombs and they give offerings, and people are like, oh, they're obsessed with their dead.
Right.
But it's not. Like, they're remembering them and giving them food so that they can sustain their life after death. So
exactly.
it really is all about this continuation, these moments of transition.
Memory and legacy, and it's cyclical, but not like we think of cyclical. Like, we think of it very as I think modern people think of like cyclical ideals of life and mortality is like very seasonal, like reincarnation cycles or something like that. But the whole goal is to ride around in a boat from day to night with, like, this chill god and just ride in a boat all day.
Well, it is a cycle of regeneration.
Still, is what I'm saying. Like, well, maybe in what you were saying, the fields you do, but, like, it sounds like you're never sitting still. Even after you're dead, you still have to go through this journey, and you still have to eat, and you still have to, like, go about the business of, like, being a person who has to maintain themselves.
Yeah, you really do. And, like, there are cycles of regeneration, right? Because when you are in the boat with Ra, like, you do rise every morning, you set every night, right? And Ra, if you know anything about the mythology, like, has to be rejuvenated every night. And has to be reborn every morning, right? So, like, there is this cycle that's happening, right? There's kind of this linear trajectory of you are born, you grow old, you die, you continue on into the afterlife. And there's a cyclical journey of everything regenerates and rises and sets.
Oh man, that's so cool. I love the idea that in death you're still not just sitting there. You got shit to do.
You got shit to do.
You gotta go on a whole journey. I mean, it almost sounds a little exhausting.
I mean, there are tiny statues called shaptis or shawaptis that people will bury with them that theoretically come to life in the afterlife to do work for you. So there's needs. There are needs.
So these are almost like the Egyptian version of, like, little house brownies that, like,
almost,
they will just do little tasks. Are there rules for these guys? Like, if you piss them off, will they just, like, fuck off and not help you anymore?
Potentially, because there are some cases where people have buried larger ones that are almost like the commanders to the troops with their smaller ones. So I guess that kind of
there's a
betrays
hierarchy.
the theory that they can revolt.
That would really suck. Like, you have to go on this journey, and you're dealing with these demons, and you're trying to get your paperwork done, and then you have, like, a union strike on top of it all, like.
Business. There's business to be done.
There's a complexity to all of this that I think a lot of people just completely miss. And I think part of the problem is that the interest in the mythology that most people have is so shallow. And so I want to say exotification is the word of, like, they like it because it's new and different and strange. And when you start finding out that, like, people are like, oh, these people, we've talked about this before, they're like, oh, they were obsessed with cats. Why were they so obsessed with cats? And it's like, well, no, they actually weren't obsessed with cats. It's that people now are obsessed with cats. And they're just, you told me, are just, like, projecting that backwards.
Yeah.
Because we look at cats on the internet all day, and we assume they were into cats, but really they're just...
they're a part of a larger whole.
Yeah, they just recognize that beasties were part of the world they lived in, and so when they made art, they put all the stuff of the world into it.
Yeah, there's a lot of tropes and a lot of stereotypes. There always really have been, kind of since the beginning of people trying to study ancient Egypt.
Yeah. When was the beginning?
Egyptology,
Yeah.
like as a discipline.
Yeah, like we all know about the Victorians and their absolute fuckery.
Yeah.
But when did it start? Even before that?
I mean, a lot of people place the interest around like 1798 with Napoleon invading Egypt and the Middle East.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because he did bring academics with him and actually created a volume that people still reference, where they were studying, digging up artifacts, right, trying to create this catalog. And when that was brought back to Europe, that kind of started this.
The first
effect.
Egypt fever.
Yes. Yeah, the first phase of Egyptomania.
Yes,
Yeah.
Egyptomania.
Quite literally, Egyptomania.
Yeah,
That
like-
then resurfaced in the 20s and 30s, and has kind of
And
just
on and
always
on.
captured interest.
I own a Singer treadle machine from 1915, and it has an Art Deco design of lotuses on it. You've seen the one. I know you've seen it, and that's the reason I love it, because I love Egypt, and specifically, I looked all over for that specific design.
Yeah.
But you see that, and just to think that this sewing machine company was putting lotuses on its sewing
Everything
machine
was everywhere.
that are made in probably Michigan or Minnesota or somewhere, and even then, I think people are just so caught up in the romance of it. And if you told them, like, Egyptians really just were people.
Yeah. They really were just people. And I mean, there are things that are different, right? It's a different way of thinking. It's a different religion. It's a different lifestyle. But they're not something otherworldly, right? They're not so exotic where you can't try and understand them or study them.
No.
They were human beings that did a huge thing and had this massive society and civilization that lasted, for a very long time.
Quite consistently.
Yes, quite consistently.
The shocking things about Egypt, like, from my study of European history, where things can change quite rapidly. Maybe not as quickly as we're used to today, but I mean, a lot of that is projection too. Their culture was so consistent in so many ways, and maybe that's just my understanding of it. But it seemed like, even though people were occasionally coming in and just taking over, the art and the culture remained strong for a crazy long time.
Partially true.
Yeah.
So the continuity that I think people think of can be considered a stereotype as well, is that Egypt is this like impenetrable imperial civilization, right, that never backed down and everything remained the same. But a lot of what we know and what people associate with Egypt is just the elite. And
that's true. That's just
be,
what we have to look at.
Right. And that can be very consistent. It does ebb and flow. There are changes to it. And there are times where people go back to the old stuff to kind of legitimize themselves at different phases in Egyptian history. But there's also like almost an underclass, right?
Yeah. Of
people who are living separate from the elite, who aren't having all of these things that we know of. And that is a much more varied culture that doesn't last as
much
long
more
through time.
Yeah.
So it's more varied, and there's less continuity, and there's more ebb and flow and influences from outside cultures and trade and migration, which I think if people knew more of would humanize a lot of ancient Egyptian.
Probably.
Things that people think about. So.
I mean, when we think about the world now, we do understand that everyone has their own context, everyone has a bias, everyone has the angle that they have, and we don't really apply that. Like, if an outside power wanted to legitimize themselves, wouldn't they throw themselves into a traditionalist faction? Like, wouldn't they want to, like, make the Upper Nile great again? I know, it's terrible. I know.
It's an old trick. Like, it's not new.
Exactly. No, but, like, we do see evidence of shit like that happening.
Sure.
Like, we do see families like the Ptolemies that were just like, we're so Egypt, guys! We're definitely super invested in it. And they did use that as,
for
like...
a reason. Yes.
For a reason.
And don't get me wrong, there are identities that continue to last, right? There was definitely a culture, just like there's an American culture.
Right.
And the society lasted so long, where it's like one of the second longest lasting societies, like, on the earth.
This is...
so...
I know, mind-boggling to me. Just... mind-boggling. And I don't know if there's an academic agreement on like why that is or why that managed to happen or what.
I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is probably location, and a lot of it I think can be taken to the culture and the hierarchy of the society, what was enforced, what wasn't.
Yeah.
The narrative that was sometimes perpetuated, especially at the height, when there were moments where the government had really strong control, or they were a very strong force to be reckoned with.
Right.
Things were re-solidified, right? And so you kind of make up what you were lacking.
Right.
But also they're located at a huge prime location, right? They have the Nile, which gives them farmland. They have the Mediterranean Sea, which gives them connections and trade routes. And
just being part of the Mediterranean, it just...
Yeah, they're in a great location.
It's all about location.
Yeah.
And you really can't do better than the Nile Delta. It's just...
No, if you go outside of it, you're hitting desert, right?
On all sides.
Yeah, on all sides. Well, 3 out of the 4 sides.
Yeah.
So, you know, it allows you to restrict things.
I think one of the things that I wish people talked about more is that Egypt was part of Mediterranean culture. Like, I know part of this is just that infuriatingly Greece has been used to like bolster up white supremacy so much in this idea that like there was Greece and there was a democracy and all this stuff happened in Greece with these beautiful pearlescent white statues, which is of course all bullshit.
Not true.
Right. Yes, exactly. It's all just this invention that's projected back, just like the cat thing.
Yes.
Only evil. But the people of the day saw themselves as Mediterranean. It's just not like we're not these guys and up. There's this whole area that included Northern Africa. And I don't think people include Northern Africa in their concept of what like the Mediterranean bloom of like cultures and trade and cultural exchange was. And it's just kind of this blind spot. And they think like there was what Greece and Rome and, you know, all these guys were doing. And then there's Egypt, who is just over here with weird head things. And, like, there's, like, no, but we know that they didn't think like that. We know that they saw these guys as, like, those chill dudes over there, you know?
Yeah, there was connection, right? And there was trade, and we can find Egyptian artifacts and mercantile goods from other places, and there was these exchanges that are happening. There's even 2 wall paintings where you can see artifacts that were known to be made in Greece, right?
Yeah,
that
exactly.
were transported, and there are letters and things like that. But I mean, as far as being a part of the Mediterranean, I think what we're doing now as scholars is actually opening that up further and saying they weren't just a part of the Mediterranean, they were also a part of Africa, right? As a larger continent. And there's that exchange that's happening. They weren't sequestered as part of Northern Africa so that they can only talk to people in the Mediterranean. There's these influences that most people haven't even considered.
Yeah.
That is now becoming a bigger conversation about how is Egypt impacted by Africa, and how is that engaging in a conversation with the Mediterranean, and what is this ebb and flow that's really being created.
It's so exciting.
Yeah.
It's so exciting because, like, I'll admit freely, I learned fuck all about Africa in all of my schooling. Like, I think there was, like, a paragraph, and then, like, and then there were some cities there, too, I guess.
Yeah, it's
there were civilizations in Africa.
Egypt, Africa. Like, Egypt's
it's like
in
you
Africa.
have Egypt, you have Mesopotamia, and then let's just skip to Greece.
Yes.
Didn't even, like, I was like, are we going to talk about the Scythians? And they're like, no, let's just go right to Greece.
Well, I think when Europeans really started studying Egypt, they were like, oh, this is a great civilization, so we're automatically going to liken it to ancient Greece and ancient Rome. So in everyone's mind, it became a part of that.
Like, these guys are the direct descendants of the ideas of these guys.
Right, which, first of all, is not true.
No.
And second of all, excludes the entire continent that Egypt is actually located on, which is Africa.
What civilization happens there?
What?
I thought Egypt was literally the only one. There, like, I remember being in school with people who just did not understand that Egypt was even in Africa. It was like there was this idea that, like, there's Egypt and then there's the rest of this just empty desert thing.
As if no one lives there.
As if no one lives there, yeah. But it's crazy because, like, we talk shit about the Victorians and how little they understood and how arrogant they were. And it's like, that didn't go away, though. No, it's still very present.
No, those are still
That
things
kind of
that we're
blind spot.
battling.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it seeps into everything, right? Like
Everything.
people thinking that Egyptian demons are the same thing as European demons. You
Mhm.
could argue that that's a symptom
Right.
of us not really trying to understand Egyptian
Mhm.
religion in its own context, but just comparing it to what we know, right?
Right.
Kind of the same thing as like, oh, it's an ancient civilization that was really strong. It has to be like Greece and Rome because why would it be like anything else? It has to be exactly this.
It's such a, I mean, it's not only intellectually disingenuous, it's intellectually lazy, which is worse.
Well, people have their own biases. I'm not saying everybody was PC in 1798. But
What? What? No, surely not.
Surely they were. I guess you could say they were doing the best they could.
I guess. Yeah. I mean, the conversation is ongoing. And I think what's interesting to me is that blind spot or that like kind of laying your concepts that doesn't only happen. I mean, obviously it happens worse to a lot of African cultures when we study them.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I remember ranting to you about how Loki was like turned into this villain, which you know doesn't jive with a lot of the original stuff
Right.
because you had to have a devil. You know, you had to have a bad guy, and this guy is like just a complete shit. So why not that guy?
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of times when you really dig into the cultures and you look at them in their own context, things are a lot more complex.
Yes.
And a lot harder to categorize.
Yes, and it's a different way of thinking, or it can
Mhm.
be sometimes, and so it can be other and interesting and exotic, but it can also be vilified, and
Yeah.
it's hard to approach that with any kind of objectivity as a human.
Yeah,
Right?
it is hard. Like, we talked before we started filming about how it feels to be part of kind of the same scholarly descendancy or as the Victorians. Like, we talk a lot of shit about them, but you were talking about how like the academic kind of world that you're a part of is still has that in it.
Yes, yeah, it very much does. Academia is a slow-moving world.
That's a nice way to say it.
Yeah, and this
Not really prone to looking inward and self-examination.
not always.
Not always.
It's a changing world, but it is
Mhm.
a slow-moving world, and knowledge production, or even just, I mean, because that's what academia is, right? You
Mhm.
study things to create ideas, to produce knowledge
Yes.
that you then contribute to society.
Yes.
And that can sometimes, like, that whole concept doesn't originate with Europeans,
Mhm.
but was definitely highlighed
Mhm.
as a specific thing and separated from the rest of society.
And codified in
Yes.
a lot of ways. Like, I think, like, obviously the Europeans didn't come up with the idea of having, like, an academic elite or a scholarly elite. Like, I know the Chinese were just, like, super into having, like, an entire class of people that just, like, we know things, we're scholars, it's our thing, it's what we do.
Yeah, same with Egypt.
But it definitely seems like the Europeans were really into putting rules on it and saying, like, this is how you be a scholar. This is how you be an academic.
Yes, this categorization and like defining different ologies. Right?
Yes.
Like Egyptology, demonology, this kind of
and
thing.
we're set apart from the rest of everyone else, and we never talk to craftspeople, and we never talk to women.
We never talk to anybody.
and we definitely never think that this could just be a tool.
Yeah, which, you know, is something that we have to just kind of live with nowadays.
Yeah.
Is even just talking to other forms of scholars is sometimes difficult and can be siloed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get so specialized, and I run into this even with other Egyptologists.
Yeah?
Like, as a demonologist, you get so specialized that even sometimes it's hard to communicate within your own field.
I mean, Egyptology is a pretty tiny,
It already
pretty insular.
is, yeah.
You know, like, you've already got a bit of small town thing going on where, like, you all know each other.
Yes,
and you
it's
even
very
have,
that. Yeah, and then let alone if I were to go try and talk to, like, a sociologist, right? You want all of those things in your thoughts.
Yeah.
Because you are studying a culture and a people and a religion.
Yeah.
But it's surprising how difficult it can be to reach across the aisle and
Oof.
try and understand other people, because we've been doing this for a long time, and
Yeah.
they've been doing it for a long
It's gotta be
time.
maddening.
It is. It's hard, but becoming a expert is a
Mhm.
double-edged sword.
Fuck.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, but there are people who are pushing against that. Like,
Yes.
I remember one of the most exciting things I've read in the last few years is that a serious, well, I think a very exciting development in understanding Roman women came about because of a hairdresser who was like, I think these weren't wigs. I think these ladies just sewed their hair up. Because the word for hairpin is also the word for needle. And then she just did it. She just was a hairdresser and then took a bunch of models and sewed up their hair and then said to a bunch of archaeologists, look, I proved that you can do this with human hair that grows out of the head and it's not a wig.
Yes.
And then all of these archaeologists were like,
oh my god.
I mean, I guess since you actually did the thing we told you was not possible to do, I guess we'll have to, like, you should probably write a paper about it. And then she did.
Yes.
And that, like, I was very excited about that because, like, I don't know, it was kind of just like a normal person who understands a thing. And then the academics were like, oh, our bad, we'll listen to you. And that just, like, feels like it never happens very much.
I mean, it does and it doesn't. The beauty of it is that knowledge is never concrete, right? So
That's true.
Things are always changing. You're always putting forth an idea, and you kind of have to always know as a person that, like, is in the world of academia that the thing that you say might be wrong 2 days later.
You got to bounce a lot of things off the wall and just kind of see what sticks.
You just have to accept the fact that you might be wrong later.
Like, someone might dig up a thing that just trashes the whole paper that you spent years on, and you're just like...
That's a part of the conversation. You might even disagree with yourself in 5 years. Like, that's a part of the conversation.
Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever, like, been very certain of something and then be like, or maybe...
Yes, absolutely. All of the time.
That sounds very, like, they're very good for the ego. That's, and I'm not being sarcastic. Like, it sounds like constantly having to, you know, would keep you from getting too up your own butt.
Yeah, in an ideal world, yes.
Ideally, yes, it should do that.
Yeah, in an ideal world, you just want to be able to be a part of the discussion, which is nice. And demonology is nice because it's so small and there's a lot that's unknown. So it's okay to just say, what do you think?
Yeah.
You know, tell me what you know.
Yeah, and you, even in the tiny 7-person tiny thing of demonology, you're doing a thing that no one else has done before, even in that. Tell us about that, because you're focusing on a different source than most people do.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so exciting. Oh my god. I talk to so many people about you, and then they're like, their eyes glaze over sometimes, and I don't stop, because I'm just like, no, you have to understand how cool this is. So even in this tiny field, you are pushing the boundaries because you are looking at different sources to learn about demons.
Yeah, there's so much that's left to be discovered.
Yeah.
So most of my research comes from the Book of the Dead, which everyone thinks is like this huge book.
Yeah, like we saw in The Mummy.
But it's not.
It's huge. It's like this big. It's bound in human skin. Has a gnarly face on the front and big lock.
Yeah.
And when you open it, magic happens and then you die.
Right. Right.
Well, like everyone but 2 people will die.
Everybody but 2 people.
Everybody but 2 people.
And there's poisonous gas that like
absolutely,
your face.
yeah.
Scarabs eat you. They're not dung beetles at all. So all of that does.
Wait,
happen.
Scarabs are not dung beetles?
They are.
Wait, what?
Yeah. But the Book of the Dead is actually just like this collection of spells. That are all meant to help people through this transition through the underworld, and sometimes you have all the spells, sometimes you don't. Most of the time it's just a collection, right?
Are there more than one? So there are many books of the dead?
Yes, No 2 versions are typically the same, and there are upwards of 200 spells. So,
oh my gosh, so it's almost like a cookbook or manual, sort of.
Yeah, oftentimes you'll see, different ones are included in different things for different reasons, kind of through time.
Okay.
But the demons that I study specifically are in a couple of those spells. And most scholars have studied them on papyrus. So when we think Book of the Dead, we think written, right?
Right,
so you look at the papyrus, and a lot of people have just focused on the words and the spells and the descriptions.
And what they say,
Right, because some of the demons have names, and they're fantastic and grotesque. So I don't blame people for studying them.
You have to tell us some of the names. What are like top 5 most rad,
Oh gosh.
most fucking metal demon names.
I mean, there's everything from like donkey ass to like upside down one who eats his own excrement.
Wait, upside down one who eats his own shit?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Donkey ass. Okay, so like I'm a fan of donkey ass. Like, do they have like lives? Do they have like families? Do they have bands? Like
Demons?
Yeah. Like, can you ship them?
I don't think they have families.
This is always where I go with things.
Yeah, I don't think they have
Oh, no.
families per
Okay.
se, but there are different groups and classes. It's more
Okay.
like based on function
Oh, I see.
of what
okay.
they're doing.
Mhm.
And there's
Because you're only
secrets of them.
experiencing them in the context of their job, right? As functionaries.
You experience them in the context, like in specific contexts.
Ah,
yeah.
okay.
The ones that I study, again, there's multiple different kinds. The ones that I study tend to have specific functions where they're the paperwork pushers, I guess.
The paper pushers. So, like, do people in the books? Are they talked about as if this is their job? Like, they go home at the end of the day, or is this more their function, as in like they exist to perform this task? It is their.
Yes, they exist to perform this task.
Oh wow.
Yes, and
okay.
this is where they are. They have titles like guardian, keeper, herald, right? And they have these functions, and their names are meant to betray what they're capable of or their non-humanness.
I'm almost afraid to ask. But upside down one who eats his own excrement. What's that guy's job?
I mean, that's what theoretically they could do to you if you don't have your paperwork in order.
Oh, okay.
And upside down in Egypt is kind of code for not right. So a thing that is wrong or not meant to be, right? Because if you're upside down, your excrement will go the other way.
I think that happened to Michael Cera in a movie we watched once.
Yeah.
Isn't there this movie where Michael Cera's upside down and then he pees and his pees into his mouth?
I mean, yeah.
Our brother was like, that is the funniest thing that Michael Cera will ever do, and we all kind of gave a groan of like, oh.
Yeah.
So we, like, there's just an Egyptian demon that's like that guy.
OG idea.
Does he do that to you, or is that what he's doing?
That is their name.
Oh.
But most people think that their name betrays what they're capable of doing to people or to deceased, because they exist in the underworld.
Oh my God! So donkey ass could just stick you into it, make you into a donkey ass.
I mean, that one's up to interpretation, I guess.
I'm really glad that there is a serious scholar looking into these very important issues. You guys, join me next year. We will do another interview to find out what donkey ass is up to. I promise.
Yeah.
What are some other demons that you can recall? Do you remember any of the names?
Oh gosh, probably not off the top of my head.
Those are pretty great.
Yeah, those are two of my favorites. Like,
wow.
I don't look at the papyrus. I look at the tomb walls because there's spells and paintings on tomb walls.
So this is your thing. This is your thing that you're doing.
Yeah. So recently, people have realized artwork also exists.
What?
In addition to and separate from papyrus and writing, and the spells are on the actual tomb walls, so it's almost like an architectural book
this is
of the
part of the book.
Yeah, they're the same spells.
Oh, they're the same spells, so they're artistically represented.
Yes.
As well as written down.
Yes.
But most scholars just kind of didn't
have focused on the words. Yeah. So my studies redirect that and focus on the artwork and talk about the likenesses and the differences to the words and the papyrus, the relationship between the paintings and the architecture because they're in tombs, you know, why certain people chose these specific spells, what is it doing for them in the afterlife, does it tell us any more about how they thought about demons, what they felt like they needed protection from, what they felt like they needed to have in order to be successful in the underworld. So it all kind of opens up those questions to interpretation.
Wow. Which is just, oh, this is so dope. I can't tell you how excited I am. Like, you're just walking into this place, almost like being the first person to be in a pyramid for thousands of years. You know, that was always my favorite part of these movies. Like, you know they're all going to die. But that moment where they, like, crack it open, they walk in, and then someone's like, maybe we shouldn't do this. And you just think they're walking into a room that no one has been in for thousands of years. Like, intellectually, that's kind of what you're doing.
Yeah, there's much still to be discovered.
It's going to be so cool in 20 years when you go back and you look at your dissertation and you're like, I was totally wrong about donkey ass.
I will say
That
it now.
guy-
No guarantees.
No guarantees. Yeah, but like you're going to be the one going over those steps again and bringing other people with you and getting people into it and being like, look at the art, dumbasses. Like, this is part of the book and part of the spells. And
Absolutely.
one of my favorite things, like, as someone who does a lot of early medieval stuff, is there's so much wild shit that the monks just drew. You have demons who, like, all of their joints are mouths that are, like, biting the other parts of their body. You have these, like, ladies riding around with their just spindles flying out behind them.
Yeah.
Which was great, because I was telling you, you can actually, like, make conclusions about what they were spinning because their spindles are flying out. And so you're like, oh, they must have been spinning flax and instead of wool. But then you're like, but you don't know if this is fantasy or reality.
Right.
So part of your, I guess, your job or the interesting thing you're going to have to do is figure out what their context was. Like, is this a story? Is this a song? Is this a fantasy? Is this a plan? Is this a spell that, like, you do? Like, what if you found out in 20 years that, like, this was not some serious spell book, but, like, the equivalent of some Teen Witch shit? Like, here's a spell for, like, to make demons like you better. And then you were just like, this is, like, teen shit, and you just didn't know it the first time because...
I mean, everything is possible, but there are other people who have studied these things before me. So I'm not the pioneer that's making all of this up and being like, this is what Book of the Dead is, and no one's ever figured it out before.
Sure,
so, like,
sure.
standing on the shoulders of people who have done some things
Yeah,
before,
of course.
best guess, a lot of research.
Yeah.
But the possibility is always out there, right? You're studying a culture that doesn't exist and has modern descendants, but with different interpretations, and some connections are lost, and some materials are lost. So there's things we might ever
You
like,
have
never
to
find.
Extrapolate everything from just the little bits and pieces that remain.
Right.
And sometimes there's a bias to that. Like, I was talking about, like, spindles, and, like, you only have the whorl because it would be metal or pottery, and you're never going to have the stick because why would you not carve that out of wood?
Right.
So, like, even what you can draw conclusions from can be biased. Like you were saying, there's an elite bias because elites obviously have the money to commission paintings and have the money to just take a big flat of papyrus and say write things on it and to hire
things out
scribes
of gold and stone and
and
things
things
that last.
that last.
Yes, it's actually called archaeological bias. So things in the record that don't survive. And the desert is a fantastic place because there's no moisture, so nothing rots, right? So sometimes things that are wood do survive.
Which is so exciting.
And that's why papyrus survives so well. But you know, there's a lot that's still not there, and if you're an average person and all of your things are made out of
just
destructible materials, we're not going to know anything about you, but that doesn't mean you didn't exist. So you're just trying to take what's left and do the best that you can with what you have. And yes, there always is the caveat that it's wrong, that there's things we just don't have and we will never know.
That's so frustrating.
It is.
Does it? I mean, it's gotta frustrate you as a scholar when you just have to. Like, it's like trying to reconstruct a garment when all you have is like one gusset or like one sleeve, and you're just like.
It does, but I think that most academics are a bit obsessive. So. Just a tiny bit.
Just a tiny bit.
Otherwise, you don't really spend 15 years studying one specific thing. And two, it's about the questions, right? It's not always about the answers. It's about the evidence and the questions and the theories. And it is about the answers, but that really just belays more questions and more conversation. So there's always a curiosity.
It's just opening the door that really matters.
Yeah, and I think that's what really keeps people going. If you're looking at academia in the purest sense, it's about the curiosity and the conversation. That's such
an amazing perspective, and I love to hear you say it. It's about opening the door and then, like, just getting the conversation going. I mean, I feel like we talk a lot about that. The conversation, like, is kind of obnoxious.
Right.
But there is something to it. Like, even just talking about it means that we aren't still stuck with the same old stereotypes,
Exactly.
the same old assumptions, the same white marble statues.
Yeah, and the conversation doesn't have to just be academics, right?
Mhm.
Knowledge can trickle down, and when it's given to society, society can do whatever they want with it. And we, as people that
Do
produce
whatever they
knowledge,
want with it. Like
do
even
whatever they want.
like, can Katy Perry do whatever she wants with?
Katy Perry can do what she wants with it.
Because I remember a certain Katy Perry video that you were not a fan of.
I didn't say it was right. I said you can do whatever you want with it.
Okay.
But also, we're influenced by society too, right?
Mhm.
Like, if we go back to the conversation about Egypt being a part of Africa, that didn't always occur to scholars, but you could argue that the conversations that we have about race and culture and exchange have influenced the way that people are now looking at their own
That's
disciplines to
true.
reconsider and ask more questions.
Do you think just very accessible mainstream culture, like Black Panther, is
Mhm.
gonna send little baby archaeologists with a wider perspective
Maybe.
into the academic world to like shake shit up?
I mean, we can hope so. We talked about the Europeans that started Egyptology and their biases, and they were doing
That's
the best
true.
that we can. So you have to still ask the question.
They were pulling a lot of really wicked bullshit too. They were.
But did they know that at the time? We don't know.
I mean, no. I mean, I think they did. Like,
Sure.
we have people intentionally putting black and white photographs onto priceless, like the bust of Nefertiti, so that it's like, oh, this isn't an important artifact. This is just a thing. We can ship it off. I mean, there was some
Sure.
real fuckery.
Yeah, I mean, humans are humans, and they'll do with what they want, right?
Yeah, I guess.
But in an
That's
ideal
true.
world, people are trying to do the best that they can with what they know. So it's always evolving. Knowledge is never concrete.
That's a
right?
very generous perspective.
Thank you.
It's always tempting to kind of, drag on the past and be like, we're so much more enlightened now.
Ooh, but we're
No.
ever evolving.
Oh, wow. I love this, and I love this perspective. And
Thank you.
so much for sharing it with me.
Yeah, you're
Oh,
welcome.
I love talking to you. I feel like I could talk to you for hours more, but we should probably.
Okay.
Thank you for everything. Is there anything else that you wanted to tell us about demonology and Egyptian or grave art or?
No, I mean, happy to come back in a couple years and tell you if I'm wrong.
Oh, I'm so excited. Yeah, that's going to be amazing.
Sure.
It's going to be amazing. Okay, well, thank you for talking to me.
You're
Oh,
welcome.
so our last question is, what is something that is happening in your field that gets you super excited or super hyped, that you just think is, and it could be like a philosophy or a trend, or, but what is something that just like, that you're excited for?
Oh, well, I think we're really getting into technology more, which I'm
Ooh.
actually really excited about because I
Giving
like,
mummies MRIs.
or like creating 3D models, right, and giving it to people that don't have internet access and things like that. So it breaks open the field of Egyptology, gets different voices, different exposure, gets
Ooh.
public conversation
Okay.
into our field. And part of that is also what I do. I know we didn't get to that part, but I do a lot.
What is
like,
that part?
Well, part of it is turning sort of the demon pictures that are on the tomb walls that are 2-dimensional into 3-dimensional models so that they can be distributed for learning purposes.
What? How do you do that? Like, you just have to kind of guess at what they would have thought that creature looked like in a 3-dimensional space?
Yeah, there's definitely a guess, right? And that I'll have to put that disclaimer of like, this is my, scholarly interpretation for this purpose of learning and distribution to the public, but it opens up the conversation of the people that can really contribute to it, and Egyptology as a field is engaging more with that, so I'm really excited to see what happens.
Oh my god, that's exciting.
When you brave the wild world of internet. So
you're gonna have so many people giving you so much amazing stuff, but there's also gonna be
Absolutely.
like that guy who's just like, oh, like that one, I don't know, just having really inane comments about it, but
yeah, and that's okay.
I guess so. Yeah. Oh man, the 3D printing thing or the 3D modeling thing is really cool. I know. I really I heard that there was a video game that came out that was set in Egypt, and they had like a second thing that went along with it where you could just go through.
Yeah, that was Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed, Ass Creek teaching history.
Yeah, they had some Egyptology consultants actually.
Were you one?
I was not, no, but I know them.
Oh, you know them? You know the consultants that worked on Ass Creek?
Yeah, it's more senior scholars. So, yeah.
I thought that walkthrough thing, like where they would walk you through and talk you through it, and it was just such a great way of putting history, real history, in like the hands of the people.
Yeah.
You know, because I think there's almost like this break where if you're just a person, you consume like low culture, there's almost this defensiveness, I think, with normal history. With normal people that you almost never expect to learn any real history, or almost defensive about it. Like, why would I expect the shows I watch to have accurate costumes? That's not for people like me. We'll just, you know, watch like the trashy television where they don't even try. But we're getting more media now that kind of blends it. Or it'll have like some bits of accuracy with like a more modern perspective.
Yeah.
Like we're seeing these shows that kind of have this like very modern social media like jokiness about historical figures, while they're like make little tweety comments about their situation. Like,
right. Yeah.
It's kind of like you said, just people having awareness of it and being able to comment on it and have opinions about it.
Yeah, access is huge. You know, and I know I said people can do whatever they want with it, but you hope, right, that people will want to engage with conversations with people like myself who've been doing this for a long time and want to get the right information, or at least the most current information that we have.
How can they do that? Like, is there a way for people who want to learn about demonology to like talk to scholars like yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's so many things that are on the internet, right? There's YouTube lectures that you can find constantly, and a lot of Egyptologists have their own Facebook pages where they post things all of the time, different articles. You can subscribe to different organizations that have journals that are out, you know, so that you can read the most current thing. And I think a lot of times people don't think that you can just email, but a lot of, you know, people that study this, you know, if you go to a school, our emails are up on the website, and you can talk to us and ask
heard
questions.
it here, folks. Stalk an Egyptologist. They would love to hear from you.
We're still human beings, so. But, you know, you can ask the questions and find the information and do the best that you can, right? And you can always just go to your friendly neighborhood library, because stuff is in there.
Libraries are great.
Libraries are great. I'm there all the time.
Yeah. I can't take credit for your interest in Egyptology completely. But I do remember checking out from the library a book on, 2 books, one on Nefertiti, one on Hatshepsut. And they were like both this.
Sure.
And we looked at them together.
Yeah, I don't know how it started, but I've never gotten rid of it, so.
I'm glad.
Thank you.
I'm really glad. Thank you so much for talking to
You're
me about
welcome.
this. This is so cool. So yeah, there are tons of resources people could learn more about Egypt, specifically demons.
Yeah.
Which is super rad.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for talking to me.
You're welcome.
Okay, bye.